To audiences, she was Scarlett O'Hara, defiant, passionate, indestructible. A woman who survived war, loss, and ruin with her chin lifted and her eyes blazing. But the irony of Vivien Leigh's life is cruel. The strength the world worshipped was something she could only perform, never truly possess. Fame arrived like a storm, sudden, overwhelming, unforgiving. Hollywood crowned her an icon, a symbol of timeless femininity. But beauty, when magnified beyond humanity, becomes a prison. Every glance became expectation. Every role became comparison. And slowly, quietly, Vivien began to disappear behind the image that made her immortal. There were nights when applause echoed louder than her thoughts, and nights when silence pressed so heavily against her chest that breathing felt like effort. She learned early that vulnerability was dangerous, especially for a woman whose face had become public property. This is not the story of a star undone by scandal. It is the story of a woman undone by invisibility. Because while the world saw perfection, no one asked what it cost to maintain it. And while Scarlett O'Hara lived forever on screen, Vivien Leigh began a far lonelier journey, one marked not by weakness, but by a mind slowly turning against itself. Vivien Leigh's rise was meteoric, but it was also merciless. Winning the role of Scarlett O'Hara did more than change her career. It erased the boundary between actress and myth. Overnight, she became a global symbol. Her image traveled faster than she ever could, freezing her in a moment of cinematic perfection that no human could sustain. Scarlett was fearless. Scarlett survived everything. Vivien, however, did not. Behind the scenes, the pressure was relentless. Endless scrutiny, endless comparison, endless insistence that she remain Scarlett. Fiery, strong, untouchable. Any deviation felt like betrayal. She learned to control every gesture, every word, every expression. Control became survival. Her marriage to Laurence Olivier looked from the outside like a union of brilliance. Two titans of stage and screen, admired, envied, celebrated. But intimacy under constant observation is not intimacy at all. Their love unfolded beneath spotlights that never dimmed, leaving little room for weakness, doubt, or rest. Vivien worked obsessively. Perfection was not preference. It was defense. She feared failure not as loss of career, but as loss of identity. Without excellence, who was she? Without admiration, did she still exist? These questions whispered in her mind long after curtain calls ended. The illusion of control held, for a while. But control, when stretched too tightly, begins to crack. Vivien Leigh's greatest battle was never with critics or rivals. It was with her own mind. Long before mental health had language the public could understand, Vivien lived inside extremes. Periods of boundless energy, brilliance, and confidence collapsed suddenly into exhaustion, despair, and terrifying detachment from reality. Today it would be recognized as bipolar disorder. Then it was simply called instability, or worse, temperament. She hid it expertly until she couldn't. Mood swings became episodes. Episodes became absences. Absences became whispers behind closed doors. Her behavior confused colleagues, strained relationships, and frightened those closest to her. She was not difficult by choice. She was ill in a world that refused to understand illness. Hospitals replaced dressing rooms. Medication dulled her fire. Silence replaced applause. She felt betrayed by her own mind, the very instrument she relied upon to perform. Acting, once refuge, she became risk. She never knew which version of herself would arrive on set, and yet she continued, because stopping meant vanishing. As her illness deepened, so did her isolation. Laurence Olivier, though devoted in his own way, struggled to live alongside a woman he could not protect from herself. Love alone could not compete with untreated mental illness and the crushing weight of fame. Their marriage fractured slowly, not in anger, but in exhaustion. Vivien felt abandoned even when surrounded. She learned the cruel truth of celebrity. Admiration does not equal care. People loved what she represented, not what she endured. And the lonelier she felt, the harder she clung to the only thing that still gave her meaning: performance. But the roles diminished. Studios grew wary. Insurance companies whispered. Reliability became a question mark. Beauty, once her shield, could no longer hide unpredictability. Loneliness settled in, not as drama, but as routine. Long nights, quiet rooms, memories replayed endlessly. She was still Vivien Leigh, but the world had moved on. In her final years, Vivien Leigh lived largely in fragments. Brief returns to the stage reminded audiences of her brilliance, but they also exposed her fragility. Tuberculosis weakened her body. Mental illness exhausted her spirit. Fame, once intoxicating, now felt distant and irrelevant. She lived quietly, almost invisibly. The woman who once commanded the world now moved through it cautiously, conserving energy, guarding what little peace she could find. There were moments of clarity, flashes of the old Vivien, sharp, intelligent, wry. But they never lasted long. When she died in 1967, there was no scandal, no spectacle, only absence. A silence so complete it felt deliberate. Vivien Leigh will always be remembered as Scarlett O'Hara. But that is only half the truth. Scarlett was fiction. Vivien was courage. She lived in a time that punished vulnerability, especially in women. She carried an illness without understanding, without protection, without mercy. And still, she gave the world performances of extraordinary depth. Not because she was strong, but because she was honest. Her legacy is not beauty. Beauty fades. Her legacy is the reminder that brilliance and suffering often coexist, and that behind every flawless image may live a battle no one sees. Vivien Leigh did not lose her fight. She endured it. And sometimes endurance is the bravest legacy of all.